We are Hardly Focused, Jack and Zach, and joining us in this segment, Birdie Bones and Robert Bones from Spirit Diaries, a podcast and YouTube series. Thank you guys for joining us on Hardly Focused. We're happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Spirit Diaries, it's a true story podcast and paranormal investigation series that deep dives into the paranormal and unexplained, that coming from your YouTube channel. Would you guys say you're more primarily YouTube with the visual element or more of a podcast?
I think right now we're more of a podcast who wishes they were more YouTube. I definitely love the video element, but yeah, we started as the podcast first, so I think we're still primarily a podcast, would you say?
Yeah, YouTube's also a lot harder and a lot more time consuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I hear that. But Zach has been raving about the crashed airplane video that you just recently posted, which I watched and loved. And that alone, I mean, that was what it took you maybe like 2 years to really get into that and be able to approach the site and do your investigation there?
Yeah, it took just over a year from when we initially planned to go to the site to when we could actually get to the site. So yeah, I'm glad to hear you guys like the episode.
Oh, I keep thinking about it because like I don't think our listeners really understand. And like, I actually was going to talk a little bit about this with you, Jack, because like we usually never talk about this kind of topic together. But like, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, as you guys know, because like, you know, for our fans, I am a patron. So that's one of the reasons why. Well, I just really like supporting people that are doing something that is not just unique and interesting, but they're also being 1,000% authentic about it. And like, that's like 100% why like I love you guys. And like, I rep you guys to anyone that I know that listens to scary like podcast stuff. Though I would say like, I am rambling because now I'm like in total like fangirl mode right now. I'm trying to remember what my original point was.
Well, let me let you think of that, because I do want to. We will get into the background and I guess genesis of Spirit Diaries with Birdie and Robert, but going back to the plane crash video, so. You mentioned it in the description of the video, so I don't know if this is necessarily a spoiler. If it is, I apologize. But the fact that you guys did everything at the crash site, you investigated, you communicated with the spirits, and then what, like the next day or a couple days later, the plane's gone. The wreckage is gone. How did you guys feel about that?
I have goosebumps. I immediately started crying, and we had no idea. They did not announce this. They wanted to remove it so there was no tourism boom to the crash site. So what we couldn't really show in the video was the hike to get there. It was off trail, unmarked. It took over 2 hours one way to get there.
It looked insane.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm talking about 4 points of contact.
Yeah.
It was the hardest hike I've ever done in my life. Like, I could not move, like literally off the couch for 2 weeks after we got back of how intense it was. So they didn't announce it, but I was editing the video for YouTube and I was like, wait, where exactly is this? Because I'm not ever given any information. So all my research always comes during the editing process when I'm trying to find details, since I'm the one who edits the videos, and I'm looking it up and I'm like doing a double take at the screen because I'm like, that's a plane on a helicopter. And then we clicked on the article and started reading it, and we're like, oh my God, they pulled the plane out of the fucking woods. And it was there for over 40 years. And the coolest part was right before we went that weekend, the spirit of the woman who I associate to be the woman in the crash, like appeared as an apparition in my room, this room, and was like, you have to go now. And like, I got such bad anxiety and I called Robert and I was like, we have to go. And it was so dangerous the first time we tried it because this is like on the top of a mountain and the wind was blowing and the wind chill was so cold. Even when we went up there, we were all in jackets because it was really, it's almost freezing.
It was very cold.
Yeah. And we brought the third person to come with us for safety just because it was so absolutely crazy. But yeah, I can't believe that happened. I'm still in shock. I've watched the episode like 50 times myself and I'm like, how is this happening?
I'm definitely one of those types.
Yeah.
If one of us got hurt, like we weren't coming back out of it. So we want to make sure there's a third person there. Cause I mean, you were butt scooting down the mountain for like a quarter of this thing. Like it was just ridiculous.
You guys definitely did not make it look like it was that treacherous. So kudos to you. I guess.
I tried to make it look like fun and mysterious, and I'm like, this was insane.
Yeah, there was tons of trees that were just laying down over because it wasn't really a trail. It was just kind of like a direction, and there was tons of trees that were laying down. Yeah, and they all had spikes, and like you had to like jump over half of them. It's like, please don't impale yourself.
Oh my God. I'm glad you guys made it out safely, because that it's just, I keep thinking of the it's the movie about the guy that like goes to Alaska and then like lives in a bus and just like he was like just out away from civilization, because that's just, I can't do that. I know I have friends that like did exactly what you guys did habitually, and I don't even think they think twice about the risks that come with like what you just said, Robert. If you get injured, what do you do at that point? I commend you guys for doing what you did.
Yeah, I'm an over planner though, so we had several compasses, we had food and water in backpacks. Like I was ready to go freaking alone survivor style. Like we could have made it a couple days if we needed to.
Now, do you think with the wreckage being removed, and I know you mentioned in the video that at one point hikers passed by you, but was there anyone from like in like a ranger, National Park Service, anything like that knew you were out there, saw the wreckage, and then said, hey, people are over here in it, maybe now's the time to get rid of it? Or do you think it's just pure coincidence and great timing?
It feels synchronous, like it feels like a synchronicity, but the reasoning of why they pulled it out was, I think a few years ago, someone highlighted the crash on TikTok, they said.
Oh.
And I think tourism to it boomed, and it was so unsafe. I mean, they cleaned up nothing. The ground had these huge peaks and valleys, which you couldn't really see in the video, but we literally had to like climb up out of where the plane was at. And there was broken glass everywhere. I mean, this was not a tourist destination, but people were treating it as like a dark tourism spot. Obviously, I mean, it was incredible to see. But because of that popularity, I guess it got on social media a few years ago, they went ahead and took it out, because before that I think only locals knew about it. It wasn't something that many people knew even existed.
Yeah, it was super dangerous too, because even when you got inside the plane, you can't really see this in the video, but the whole thing kind of shifts.
Yeah.
And like looking at original plane crash photos and then just photos of people had taken a few years back, like the plane was a lot higher up the hill. So like, well, not a lot, but it was I think it was like 10 feet higher
at least
up the hill. So it's like it was slowly
moving.
sliding and moving down the mountain.
Because it did not. It looked level. I mean, it wasn't like exactly level, but it looked like it was stable. So that's also good editing, I guess.
Yeah, and I think they were also concerned from like an ecological standpoint of the flora and fauna, and because the trail was so dangerous, I think a few people who had went out before us had gotten hurt, and they didn't want people going really off trail. That area is like super dangerous, so. Yeah, it's just a lot of mudslides and rock falls.
In that video, you can actually see the elevation change. So I'm handing Birdie things. It's like I'm like 6 foot above her on the side of the mountain, and she's like dropped down where I'm handing her things.
Oh wow,
the wrong things, but I'm still handing her things.
That's in North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you guys just about when you got into the paranormal, like when you first became fascinated with it, has this been something that you've been interested in your entire lives?
Go first.
I was never interested in the paranormal. I hated the paranormal. Yeah, but I've always been able to see spirits, and I never really associated that with the paranormal, I think, until paranormal television came out. And then that's when I seen that there was people who called themselves mediums and claimed to talk to spirits. And I'm like, oh my God, like, is this a thing? Because I thought I was like alone for the longest time. And after, I think, as I got older, it kind of got worse or more frequent. And then during college, I really went on this, like, I'm going to figure this out, like, to either make it stop or like do something about it. And then I think that's when I kind of started digging into the rabbit hole of like, let's test this. Where's the limits? Like, how ridiculous can this get? And like, let's just, I don't know. I'm science minded. So I just want to know exactly how it works and where it's coming from and how other people can do it too.
Nice. Is this what brought you two together ultimately?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, how did you started?
Mine started pretty young, just because my house is incredibly haunted, and anybody that's heard the podcast knows, like, it's ridiculous. Like, I can't even convey how like crazy that house gets sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so my dad got super into paranormal investigating when I was really young. So I was like 8 to 10 years old with a digital recorder in my house, and at midnight just asking questions, trying to see if something happens, asking them to throw things. Like, I started really young.
Yeah, we got into it together. We had started dating, and the first time I went over his house, I was like, well, I have something to tell you. I was like, I don't know if you'll believe me, but your house is haunted. And I started telling him, who it was haunted by. I told him the flooring underneath his carpet, like, of what it looked like originally, and went through all these things to where it was like super factual for you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, cool. And he walks out of his room and he's like, hey, Dad, Birdie's a medium. And like, that was really strange for me, because like I had never told anybody for like years and years and years and years. So I was just like so scared. And then like, he was like the chillest person, because I didn't know they had thought their house was haunted or any of that. So,
and I think my dad's response was, really? Does she feel anything now?
Yeah.
So I remember now what I was gonna say. So this is part of the reason why, like, especially if like our listeners like paranormal stuff and just like hearing about this stuff, or especially if you've had your own situations, that's why I really like what you guys provide, because most of what they do in the first season especially of their podcast is they go about their timeline of just everything that's happened to them, what's led up to why they decided to create the Spirit Diaries. Because literally is just kind of the thing that spoke to me is the fact that you literally are just also kind of letting us be part of the process of you like getting over the fact that this is a thing that you can't not deal with. And I definitely relate too, because like my house was also haunted as fuck growing up. And evidenced by the fact that I usually don't have any issues now. Like ever since I moved out of my house, things have just magically, my life has finally like started growing in a direction. It's very weird.
Well, to that point, Zach, before we started recording, your cats were in view. And forgive me if this is a ridiculous question, but do you think cats, dogs, that they can see or at least feel spirits, especially if you're in a house that's haunted?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think our animals are aware of stuff. Sometimes when there's activity going on, they're like looking directly in the direction that it's happening. And there's definitely been private cases we've done where the animals have been indicators for the people that maybe, you know, something was up, or sort of like validating each other that a certain area of the house is creepy. So I think it's like instinctual based, and they're very instinctual animals. And I think it's just that, you know, hair raising type of feeling to where, you know, something's off that animals can feel. And I think we still have, you know, haven't fully evolved out of those innate survival senses.
Sure. So for those new to Spirit Diaries, was there a specific case that, or topic that was, I guess, the genesis for creating the podcast?
Our lives.
Yeah.
It was kind of just that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it started with Birdie telling her story from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and I started that too because I was super angry that, you know, all this medium stuff had been going on. I had started taking private cases before the podcast happened. And I had one case where I was like, this is it. I'm done. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I had stopped doing it. And every time I stop engaging with the paranormal, it seems to get more active and worse, almost like a punishment. At least that's how it felt in the beginning. So my whole deal was, I'm not doing private cases anymore, but what I will do is I'm going to tell everybody everything. Like, I'm not hiding anything. I'm being completely transparent. Like, I will say it to the world. And then once I'm done telling my story, we're done. Like, that's my final contribution to Spirit. I'm going to tell it, and then I'm going to be done. And the podcast started off where I didn't share my name. I definitely was never going to share my face. It was just kind of going to be this like void type of person, you know, telling their story. And then I was completely going to disappear. And that was going to be the end. Like, I had no intent for it to, it's my entire life now.
Nice. Okay. And this might be just for the technical side of things. My last question about specific to the podcast and the cases that you've done, but what would you say is the most frightening and or the most dangerous case you've investigated since you started doing the podcast?
I think
Post Town. Yeah.
What was that?
That is a claimed haunted school in Ohio. We went there for the first season of the YouTube series.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shaking. I absolutely hated that place. And I mean, I can't stress enough that these places are incredibly expensive to go to. And we paid to be there for 12 hours and you can't get refunds. And we left after 2.
Oh, wow. Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah,
it was dark.
It was really, really scary to where I don't think we would have been physically harmed, but like the psychological aspect of that place.
It was messing with you pretty hard.
It was really scary. It just definitely had one of those energies to where like, if you felt like you were going to go insane, that's some place that would make you crazy.
And I vet all the locations beforehand. So I do the research and I find out everything I can just so that when we're walking through, I can validate as she's reading. And the dark stuff that was there was not known to me and not really advertised until the walkthrough initially that I take, because I always take a walkthrough. I mean, you guys see in the video that she's stuck in the car and blindfolded. And I'm doing a walkthrough and they're like, oh yeah, and we think something's been summoned here. And I was like, wait, what now? And they're like, it's not evil, but it's definitely malicious. I was like, I'm gonna need you to get a dictionary out because those things are pretty close together.
Yeah, that sounds like important need to know information, not just something you just kind of brush off. Oh yeah, by the way, you know, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and then as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh shit. I was like, somebody summoned something here. And he's like, oh my God, like this isn't like, I think that's really cool too, because it was something that was only said in the tour and it wasn't online. So for anybody who's like, you know, or am I getting like researching information while I'm in the car? It's like, that's something that isn't documented anywhere. So I thought that was really cool. But then as soon as I called it out of like, that like thing is there, the entire place went from like kind of creepy to like a complete like hellscape.
Total 180.
Yeah, but they also collected like haunted objects there that were like,
why?
really
They were a massive
Why?
lot of like they were getting sent like haunted dolls and things like that, and that's not something I knew about prior. And it's like I remember getting to that part of the tour, and I'm like, oh, great, cool.
what are we doing?
Oh,
Well, Zach, I have an answer.
Bad idea.
Zach, I have an answer to your question. You asked why. The answer is because some people just like to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes, that is true. But like, wow, that is an awful idea. I'm just like, ooh, that gave me goosebumps just thinking of it.
Yeah.
So like,
Now,
They tried to feed the fear too, though, because I mean, they had like welded a little tiny like rebar person-shaped like thing, and they had put like a mask on it, and it was like sitting in an open closet that you could walk past. And I just, it was like they were trying to.
It was
just
like
drive up
half
the fear.
funhouse,
Yeah.
half
But
location.
they don't need to do that. That's a little
No.
much.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that's the other reason. Like I really like the fact that you guys kind of bring the ethical side of the paranormal investigations into things, because it's not really just like, I'm gonna go on a mini rant, but I like the science aspect that you guys focus on, because we were talking about animals earlier, and I'm sure I've mentioned this at some point randomly before, but mantis shrimp, the fact that that there's a being on this planet that can see outside of our like I forget how many like light spectrums they can see in, but if there's any planet or any animal on this planet that could see ghosts, it would be mantis shrimp, because of what they can see. So the fact that like when I realized that that was possible scientifically, to me it's kind of hard to dispute the fact that it must be possible for us to not be able to visually see something, but maybe something is still there. Like there's so much about the world and about like just even like our own ocean that we don't even know, or even our own brains that we haven't figured out yet. So to me, like there's so many things that are too uncanny to not be plausible in some way. Like it's just like sometimes stuff just happens and you're like, well, that happened, and I can't really deny that happened at all. And I think also from an energetic standpoint, it's really interesting that you felt so bad being in that area that it was like, okay, this is too much, because you could literally feel it grating against your own like capacity for energy. And like the scary thing to me is people that don't like feel that and just kind of just stay in places like that.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, because it's weird to me that someone just magically had the idea to just start getting haunted things and put them all in one place where there was something that was summoned. That's just odd to me. So yeah, good on you guys for getting out of there.
And that's what I appreciate about you too, is that you there's a human element to it and a human approach, Birdie, especially if you're saying, I'm not comfortable, I don't like this, I need to get out of here. Well, then good, right? Because you're not forcing yourself to stay somewhere where you don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, we're definitely like, this isn't about fear. This isn't to see like how far we can push ourselves. This is about, the first season was really about figuring out mediumship. And as far as I was concerned, I was like, you know what? I didn't know anything bad was here. I got that something's bad is here. Good job. We did it. Let's go. So where, I mean, and like you're saying, if somebody doesn't know and they're in one of these places, that can just lead down a huge rabbit hole of, are they going to get, an attachment, or how bad is it going to get? Or is it going to like start psychologically influencing them to where they're not realizing, especially like living in a place like that? Oh my gosh, I couldn't even bear being in there for a few hours, and the owner lives there inside the building. And I can't imagine being around that intense of energy all the time. I can't imagine what that's doing like physically to health or mental health. It's wild.
Forgive me for not asking this ahead of time. Where are you located?
We are based out of Tennessee.
Okay. So we're in Massachusetts. and we're well, I'm in Massachusetts. We're in New England. Let's put it that way. But Salem, Massachusetts, obviously very famous for the witch trials and an absolute mess around this time of year. Come Halloween, it turns into a nightmarish tourist trap. No pun intended.
That started about like a week ago, probably. Yeah.
Probably, yeah. But have you two been to Salem?
We haven't.
No.
It's
on the list.
You absolutely should. I mean, even just to get through, it's not a place that's designed for the tourist trap that it becomes around late September, all throughout October. But if you can muster through the traffic, it's amazing. It is, and I think it'd be right up your alley too. The Witch Museum's up there, and if you're into it too, there's a very good video game store as well.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of video games, there's been a question that's been burning in my mind since I listened to the episode where you guys randomly like record skipped and talked about it. Please give us more details about the time you guys worked at the arcade and someone took a shit in the Jurassic Park game.
That was all her.
Yeah, we both worked for a pretty popular, famous theme park. And yeah, I worked in games, so I got to deal with all that funness of the carnival like games and the arcade. But yeah, it was a horrific job, and a part of that job was being in the arcade, and it was completely normal for people to just go ahead and use the Jurassic Park game to poop in. Amazing, because there was a bathroom like right across the courtyard, not even 50 feet away.
No,
I didn't survive there for very long.
Was that the only game that had like? Because I imagine it's got like that car sort of setup where it's got the bench.
It had a seat, so you can kind of squat in there.
Was that the only game in the arcade that was set up like that?
Yes.
Okay.
All the other one, I mean, there was a few racing car games, but the Jurassic Park game was like in a corner, so I think it just gave that perfect amount of darkness and privacy, you know.
I mean, like, I keep thinking about it because it's like, it has to be the same person. Like, it can't be multiple. Can it really be multiple people?
It happened over the course of like years. Like, this was a common thing to where I'm like, oh God, what happened here? And they're like, oh God, again? Like, this always happened.
I always want to know if it happened while they were playing the game.
Right.
If it was just like, it was just a really scary game, or like the motion just helped get
like
it out.
Like the vibration. Yeah,
exactly.
the vibration.
I think I've actually like beaten that game. I think I remember going to an arcade once and just feeding it quarters or whatever, and actually managed to play through all of it. And I can tell you with confidence, it is not scary in the least. And if anything, now it is a relic of its time. Remember, that thing has got to be about 30 years old at this point. There's no like jump scares. There's nothing that would elicit anyone. There's not even like a brown note or whatever from South Park. There's nothing in that game that would elicit a bowel movement. You just it's someone or a group of people trolling you. It'd be really funny if it was one person who just manages to pull it off every time.
Yeah,
just one of those like year pass holders. It's just like, I'm gonna go shit and ride this weekend.
It reminds me of like, in middle school, and like I'm not even joking, this actually happened. So there was multiple times during a course of 1 year where, and it was in the girls' room, someone would take poop and then write a boy's name on the wall. And we all found out about it, and everyone was just like talking about the phantom pooper. And like we literally, like legit, what we're just thinking is, there's someone with just like one of those old-fashioned, old-timey theater masks on, and like a purple cape with like gloves, just like dashing away, like, and then like changing out of it and just like a normal person after. Like, people are weird, man. Like, man, that's like the weird. That's like, no matter what is in this world, like there's nothing that will be as weird as how people actually act.
Yeah. Yeah. So Zach and I we grew up in the same town. We went to the same schools. So I distinctly remember one day in between classes, walking down the hallway, walking by that bathroom that you're talking about, Zach, and one of the teachers, like it was like one of the 7th grade teachers, walks out, and it was an older woman, like an older frumpier woman, and she just looks exasperated, and she just says out loud, she walks out of the bathroom, "It happened again."
Like that's why so like the moment I heard that story, I immediately got a flashback to that actual event in my life, and I'm just like, oh wow, like this is great. So I'm glad I got to actually ask about that. I've been dying to know. I just like, but yeah, like there's a lot of weird stuff out there in the world, but people definitely take the cake most of the time. And I don't know. I really like the fact that you guys have taken this approach to things. And I really just kind of wanted an opportunity for us to just kind of like talk to you and see what you guys actually like doing. What do you guys usually listen to for music?
I am definitely punk alternative all the time. And I've converted this one when we started dating.
Long time ago, yeah.
Heck yeah.
And I'll pretty much listen to anything that's not country.
I mean, yeah, I agree with that.
If there's country on, I'm going to imitate it, and I'm going to make up my own lyrics, and they're going to be terrible and probably offensive. So it's just best that it's not all for anybody.
Oh, man.
Now, do you have any particular music, band, or specific song that you listen to get yourself amped up, either to research for a new podcast, to record a new podcast, or if you're actually out on location?
On location, typically I'll listen to a song, and I've alluded to it between every episode. I tried to set up a trigger for getting into the medium mindset, because I've really over the course of my life tried to work on having an on and off switch. That way I'm not just oh my gosh, your grandma's here all the time, because that's really annoying. So ironically, the song that always tends to open up my mediumship. What is the name of it? What is the title? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. What is the title of the song? It's the opening. Oh my gosh, what is
Because you don't
happening?
listen to the original version. You listen to the
I
piano.
listen to the piano version.
Cover.
Oh my gosh, why is it? This is because I'm on the spot.
It's the Carry On My Wayward Son?
Yeah, Carry On My Wayward Son.
Oh, okay. Kansas, yes.
Yeah. And it happened because of Supernatural, the freaking TV show. Because I heard it all the time, and then they talked about spirit stuff, and he was a huge fan of Supernatural, and I heard it in the background, and it became this trigger early on in my mediumship to whenever I heard that song, it triggered me opening up for my mediumship. So ironically, as we're driving to location, I'm listening to the song, and I'm like, this is so stupid. Because I haven't shared it, because it's oh man, these people are trying to pretend to be Sam and Dean. But it's a trigger that happened, and I swear every time that song plays, I'm immediately psychically ready to go. It's ridiculous.
Nice.
That is hilarious, because that means that somewhere in the world there might be someone that does that to the Rick Astley song.
Oh man, that was
Have you found though, when you're doing research show, any connections to music or any bands in general that have their own connections to the paranormal?
I don't know. I've been listening to a bunch of, typically around podcast time, I listen to the Viking music that's been getting popular, of
oh yeah,
chanting, and I mean, down to the Mongolian throat singing is so spiritually connected. And I know it sounds so silly, but that's some of the craziest stuff, to where I always feel spiritual connected to that. But I mean, aside from it, in the most recent episode, the spirits bring up music too, which is always kind of fun. But they brought up Mad World by Tears for Fears. in the plane episode, which I thought was really interesting too, because it just music transcends.
And that song
really does.
That song gets connected with because I think it's in the movie Donnie Darko, which I think is I saw the movie like when it came out.
I didn't even think about that, Jack.
Yeah, but that's because that movie's in the sort of that realm, right?
Yeah, I think it's in more of like a spooky paranormal-esque type of thing.
I stay away from all spooky media, so I don't know.
The only reason why it's weird is because there's a random part where, like, I think the central thing, it's such a weird movie, but there's like a plane turbine that like falls through the sky and like goes through the dude's house, and like it's a really weird movie. I don't really know even how to explain it. But like, it's just weird. I can see why you made that connection, Jack, because, the plane, Donnie Darko, turbine falling through the house. Like, I think I understand your thought process, but.
And I just realized in that movie too, it's a cover of Mad World. It's the Gary Jules version, not the Tears for Fears version. As you can see, I know nothing about music, but, But I was just thinking too, like haunted venues, like concert venues or old theaters. Those I've just been in general just fascinated when you see, in like the quintessential main street of a town, and they have the theater. It's usually got some name like the Globe Theater, and it's just been sitting abandoned for decades, but always curious not only what such a place would be like when it was actually in service, but if it's a place where a medium like yourself could go and hear voices or actually communicate with any spirits of like former patrons or performers. Is that something you've ever looked into?
My uncle actually used to temporarily own one of those theaters on a main street in my town. So I spent an entire summer like chilling inside of it alone. Nice. So haunted. Like the first time I was in there, he like walked me through the theater and we were alone, and a football was up, and I think I forgot this to tell this in our podcast, but there was a second like balcony level. Mm-hmm. And a football up there had like thrown from the very back down, and he's like, oh crap, somebody's in here, and he runs up and nobody was in there, and he's like, that happens sometimes. And then he walked me through the backstage, and backstage it's just like so much energy, especially when shows happen. I mean, everybody's passing through those hallways. It was one of the places where every artist has like signed and touched and like left a mark on the wall. And then I spent the rest of the time laying on the bar watching that 70s show because I refused to like go back into the venue. But yeah, those places I feel like are more haunted than some of these places that like promote like, oh, we're so haunted, come here. It's like, no, just go to a music venue and like be the first to show up or the last to leave, and you'll have stuff happen.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Speaking of that 70s show, have you had a chance to check out that 90s show on Netflix?
We survived, I think, half an episode.
Oh, survived.
just didn't hit the same.
Yeah.
I'm an apologist.
I'm old too, and I was just like, stop! I don't like this.
I'm an apologist. I watched that whole season. I liked it. I thought it was good. But you're not the first nor third person to tell me that they couldn't make it through the first episode.
I wanted to love it. I think I just needed. I think we were looking at it as like that 70s show again, instead of giving it, credit for being a brand new show and being fresh. So
it hit real close to home. It's just
yeah.
It's like there's some things I don't want to remember about the 90s.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, fair point. Fair point.
Zach, before I throw it to you for any final thoughts, I was thinking about this earlier, but I want to get your guys, and again, forgive me if this is like an elementary question, but I want to get you guys' take on Ouija boards. Do you call shenanigans on those, or do you actually find them to be supplemental to what you do?
Can I make a quick addendum to what you just said for a second?
Sure.
So, one thing I don't know that you know about this, Jack. I remember listening to a couple podcasts in the last few years about them, and The origin of them has been slightly debated, but the story that I remember and held on to is that basically the Ouija board created itself.
Okay. And also what?
So I'm going to leave it with that.
Yeah, I don't think
that needs so much more explanation. I don't think that there's anything wrong with Ouija boards personally. I think if you're using it as a tool to communicate, I think if you think that the Ouija board can be dangerous, then so can a spirit box, so can an app on your phone. I think where the Ouija board gets dangerous and so many people have these negative experiences with it is because we've all associated it with being so negative and so bad to where every time you're doing it, you're just like expecting to summon a demon. And that type of energy, it's like, if you're like, oh, when is the demon going to show up? Like that type of energy can, actually bring forward something nefarious. So, but at their core, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with Ouija boards. And I've also heard the origins going back to like some of the original philosophers were like rumored to have used Ouija boards to like get some of the like theories we have now. So it's a really interesting, like, yeah, spirit boards or talking boards like go back well beyond the origin of like the modern like Victorian seance playing game.
Okay. / Hasbro taking it for themselves.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. I'd never really understood that one personally. But yeah, like
Scrabble or a Ouija board?
Scrabble. It's a scam.
Let's see. I feel like hiding in fear tonight.
I wasn't sure if among like, mediums and folks who, make it their life's work to really investigate this stuff. If you bring up a Ouija board and you look at it and just like, that's child's play, that's posers use Ouija boards. I wasn't sure if that's the mentality there.
No, I mean, I absolutely think they could be legitimate. I think anything can be legitimate. Like, I mean, you can use Post-it notes to like communicate with the dead and like fold up little things. Like, you can use anything. There's like people who have developed like whole divination methods by using different types of like colored Skittles and candy and stuff. So I don't think there's anything that's child's play or anything like that. And I am very like adamant that like just because I'm a medium doesn't mean I know more than anybody else. Like my guesses are still as good as everybody else's. Spirits don't ever really talk about anything besides themselves. So there's not really any talk of like what really is beyond. So I never have any like say all of what actually is or what, who's real and who's not. Like, I mean, I think it's all up for interpretation.
Okay. Zach, I'll throw it to you before we wrap up.
Yeah, I guess just a little bit tack on to that. For me personally, I just don't like if I see a Ouija board, I don't fuck with it. And for me, that's personal because part of what was weird for me growing up is my house lived on the edge of a marsh. Also, it was behind woods. Right down the road from me, it was a Catholic and Protestant cemetery that faced each other. So that was kind of weird. And then up the other side of the street, there was a indigenous people reservation. And I found out through my own travels of trying to just like talk to other people that had stories that our town, Jack, actually used to be a Native American prayer village before it became what it is today. Also, we were right underneath the water table. So my theory has always been that my house has been kind of a nexus of spirits, similar to Robert's house growing up, because there would be many times I'd just be chilling in my room and then like think that I saw someone like my grandfather coming down the stairs, and it'd just be like random disembodied legs. Like I remember once I looked over and I saw like it literally looked like Mardi Gras colors, like a jester pants, and I was just like, that makes no sense, and I hope that I was just imagining things. So I am very used to just kind of going through life and ignoring stuff, and it takes a lot to actually bring up some of the things that you deal with. So like, I guess my final thoughts are like, what would you, because like honestly, I've gotten to a point now where I'm really not concerned with people thinking that I'm crazy. Like, I definitely know what I grew up with, and unfortunately, also my mom is schizophrenic, and there's a lot of moments where she fell really deep into the occult and trying to figure things out as things were happening, and it's very difficult to hold on to the mental health aspect of dealing with the paranormal, which is what I always like to come back to. Like, that's why I hold on to the science aspect, and I also think of the mental health aspect, because I want to know what your opinions are on like how all of this stuff energetically, from like a scientific standpoint, like what that makes sense to you. Because I was growing up with watching my mom abuse a spirit board, and then seeing and dealing with all of the weird things that happened to me in my house. I've had to develop my own theories and my own ways of feeling comfortable and protecting my own energy. So I think of everything as like an energetic kind of give and take. And I think that a lot of these things, when you do stuff, you don't realize what you're putting out, and that other things can feed into. So I just wanted to see what your general thoughts were in that, because I always like to think of things as in like a theory of everything kind of aspect.
Yeah, do you want to take it or do you want to? Yeah, so energetics are, a part of everything in science. I mean, especially like even down to talking about like plants or anything has its own sort of energy and energetics associated with it. But yeah, definitely if you have the intent of something, and I think it comes into that form of like manifestation of, if you have the intent of communicating with something, you're going to communicate with something. Or if like you're developing your own protection methods, it's like, if I truly believe that, I had this like manatee stuffed animal as a kid, and in my head, if I was touching the manatee, then there was no spirits who could touch me. And every time I held it, it worked. And it's like, there's not like a science behind that. It's almost like your own psychic power of, you're telling yourself so much that like, this isn't going to happen if I do this. And I mean, that's where we get superstitions coming from, of like, throw salt over my shoulder, and I think it's all like, I think that's why the paranormal is so hard to really quantify on a scientific level, is because everybody's experience is so different, and your experience in that home might not have been your mom's experience in that home, might not be somebody else who ever lives in that home's experience, because it's like, and we all come from different backgrounds. And I've noticed that, especially bringing us to locations, I'll have certain spirits who will interact with me, and he'll have certain ones who interact with him. And it's really interesting to see when you have different peoples of different backgrounds and everything come in, where your individual experience takes place. But yeah, I'm sorry your house is haunted. I feel so bad.
It's all right. Sure. It's one of those things where, just like you were saying, Robert, you just walk over to your dad, like, oh yeah, Birdie's a medium. Just like after a certain period of time, you just kind of like just get used to it. I remember distinctly one point, like we all heard this, like I had a walkie-talkie, and it was just going off randomly upstairs in my grandfather's attic, like apartment room. And like I've had a lot of really weird dreams when I switched up there to like actually have a real room. But one day there was just a walkie-talkie just going off. None of us wanted to go up there. And then I remember my grandfather coming home from work and going upstairs and asking why the door to the attic like little crawl space, because there's like a little fire escape attached to our house. It was a really weird house. But he was asking why the door was open. And I was like, none of us were upstairs. He's like, well, we don't have ghosts. And he laughed. And I just looked at him dead in the face and was just like, you know how wrong that statement is, Papa, but all right. All right. You keep living that dream.
I think those experiences, just like when you live in a house like that growing up, it just kind of like hardens something inside of you to where it's like,
it does.
And people ask, they'll ask Birdie, they'll ask me all the time. They're like, are you afraid? Are you scared? And I'm like, typically no. Like, I can shut any of that off and just walk into a room and be fine. It's like, because I had to do it at 8 years old. So it's like, it's not affecting me now.
All right, very good. Before we wrap up here and get the old promotions out of the way, is there anything big on deck for Spirit Diaries that you guys can tease right now?
The biggest thing right now is that we are back to making our series. So season 2 has just released, and then it's going to be coming out monthly. So that's really exciting. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're excited. We weren't able to make content for a little bit. So now we're back to it, and it is back.
Nice. And where can folks listen and watch your series?
So the podcast is also available on YouTube. That is youtube.com/Spirit Diaries. And then the podcast is on all major podcasting apps. And I think most of our listeners listen on Spotify, so it's definitely there.
Nice. Awesome. And you have a Patreon too, right?
We do have a Patreon. They get exclusive content. So we're all about being transparent. That's how we started this podcast. And that's how we've been really running all of our stuff since then. So on Patreon, we do put all of the uncut footage from these places to see, the boring stuff or the stuff we cut out from my reading or any other evidence that we just didn't deem worthy of an episode. So all of that full content is on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Spirit Diaries.
Awesome.
And they have merch.
We do.
Nice.
I forgot about this. Look, you're doing better than I am. Yeah, we have a whole store. So we have it's turning into like a full-blown metaphysical shop. So it's spiritdiaries.etsy.com. So we have merch, t-shirts, handmade candles, and
lots of things made by Birdie.
Yeah,
nice.
Lots of stuff.
Etsy, not many podcasts in YouTube series like yours on Etsy. You might be one of the first ones that we've talked to that has an Etsy shop.
We're weird.
Yeah. It's kind of our thing.
Yeah, we started, I started, when I did private readings, I was giving people like candles or like different spiritual items to help them out. And then a lot of people listening to the podcast in the beginning were like, oh, well, I would really like to like get one of those or buy one of those. And I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? I guess it kind of developed into a store, and we've recently been looking at potentially getting a storefront for it. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's turned into its own little side venture. This is a whole like conglomerate now of like a Spirit Diaries universe.
Awesome.
You're gonna have to get be a LLC soon.
Yeah.
The never-ending list.
Oh, yes.
Well, Zach, I appreciate you setting this up for us. And Birdie and Robert, thank you so much for coming on Hardly Focused to talk about Spirit Diaries. This was fun, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, thanks for having us.